Okay, I'm back with part 2. As I said, it's been a while since I've done the videos and I wasn't watching the time, so I went a little too slow. But we'll continue on. We'll finish this book in 2 parts. Here's the other part of the Western Railway Company, and I still don't see a date here. But one of the pages has a date because I know I saw, oh, there it is, 1919. So that's a pretty old page. Here's a sticker that I believe Lori Jagadish sent me. And I made this long banner out of leftover scrapbook paper with seam binding stitched to it, and then this little stamped piece on copy paper. It says memories on it, copy dyed paper. And then a couple more pieces that I made were tucked inside. Vintage ledger paper. There's a vintage playing card here and a little vintage crocheted piece. This piece is something that I stamped and inked, and then this is from a vintage receipt book. This is a stamp, 2 stamps I think. Copy dyed paper, a vintage flash card. I made this piece, and this is a vintage ticket that someone sent me. I want to say Lori Jagadish, but I may be giving her credit for other people's gifts too, but I think that was Lori. And another vintage note card. Definition that I stamped onto a tag. Here's a decorative page out of a different book, from the Dry and I book, which I made a junk journal out of and did a swap with Lee Pogue, I think. It's got a couple doilies behind it and crocheted. I edge punched the edge of the book. Some, trying to think if they're rub-ons or stamps. They don't feel like rub-ons. Part of them are stamps and part of them are rub-ons. Okay, here's from the Pilot Logbook, a vintage address book. A couple of scrapbook pieces that I stitched together and stitched on as a pocket. This is a vintage library card. I love it. Love it. Someone sent that to me. I know Jill Robertson made this Kool-Aid dyed tag, and somebody sent me this vintage greeting and a vintage, I think it's vintage, flashcard. A Brett Girl from a vintage Scholastic magazine and a little copper metal piece. I stamped that piece. This is a vintage Big Ben card, and I stamped on vellum and then glued it to this, and then I stamped on this vintage paper and glued it in. And then this is a stamped page, and these are both stamped pieces and inked and stitched together to make a long pocket. There's a vintage receipt from Maxwell Hardware Company that someone sent me. I love it. As I said, I love all vintage paper ephemera. And this is another receipt paper, log paper. Someone sent that to me too. This is an opera book page, and I just glued some pieces on for journaling, and then this was just made out of a piece of manila file folder. And this was sent to me by Lee Pogue, and it's architect's graph paper on it's vellum, and I used a sticker here that says plans, and then put a couple numbers on there with stickers. This is a vintage ledger paper in a foreign language, and I put this sticker on the top. It says, "Today is the best day because of you." This was also sent to me by someone, and it's green, kind of a vellum. It's too heavy to be tissue paper. And I put this little doily here and some green stamps, and I made this list sheet. There's an envelope in the middle, airmail envelope that someone sent me, and it's got some things from vintage magazines glued on here, and a vintage flashcard as a pocket, and then I made these two pieces. This is part of the envelope folded up as a pocket, piece of lace that I think Lee Pogue sent me that too, and this I stamped. And this is a printout, and these are scrapbook paper. This is Tim Holtz ephemera, I think. And I folded the flap of the airmail envelope back this way and put some washi tape here. There's a magazine, vintage magazine piece here, and this is made from a file folder. Another sticker from Lori. Another piece of the vintage little sketchbook. Some banners that I made. The other side of the Architect's graph paper. I believe that's Enrico Caruso. I'm not positive. I covered up his name. This one has an envelope from one of those vintage greeting cards, and I glued on some vintage music paper and vintage game pieces, a little bit of lace, and a little muslin bow, and a sticky back piece that says laugh. This is a dressmaker's tag, I think, and I think I got this, purchased this from A Tattered Dream, and another vintage note card. This is from a 1980 something planner. This is from a vintage children's book that they would have gotten in school, an instructional type of book. A tag that I stamped on, and a Betty Crocker coupon. And this is the back of the Big Ben card. This is a stamp. This postcard is a Stampin' Up! Stamp. And then I stamped on this piece of a file folder. More of the, it's a 1983 planner. And then I glued this little bird on that was cut out from, I think it came out of an old scrapbook, that vintage scrapbook that was falling apart. This is from Sailor's Portland Concrete, or Cements. This came out of an old library book, and I just glued it. It's very fragile, so I just glued it to that. And another piece from the Railroad Company, and this is one that I made on a piece of file folder. A stamp, address book, pilot's logbook, coffee dyed paper, and that's the end. So I hope you enjoyed taking a peek at this book. I'm sorry I went so long with it, but I'll be back with some more videos soon. Thanks for watching.